And welcome to uh, the Downtown Aviation Economy and Innovation Subcommittee for the month of March. I'm Daniel Valenzuela, Phoenix City Councilman for District 5. I'm honored to chair this subcommittee and to be here with my colleagues, Councilwoman Felda Williams from District 1, Councilman Michael Nowakowski from District 7, and on en route, we have Councilwoman Laura Pastor from District 4. The first item of the subcommittee and the last item is the call to the public. It's more than just a symbol, but it certainly is a reminder that the public has the first and the last word when it comes to how we do business and what we're doing here at the City of Phoenix. We don't have any cards that I can see for call to the public up front. The first item is just for, actually what I'm going to do is take the liberty to move item 5 up. We'll go ahead and take care of item 5, which is the last item on the agenda. Thank you for the flexibility of our staff. Parking improvements text amendment.
Thank you, Chairman Valenzuela, members of the subcommittee. You'll recall this item was before you at your last meeting where we presented a larger overview of the proposed text amendment and changes related to addressing parking as we've had a lot of success with our adaptive reuse in our restaurant areas. A memo that I have here that I believe all of you have a copy of, and we have some over there at the table as well, details the staff proposal, which is to delete everything in there except for the language regarding the on-site parking requirements for outdoor recreational areas. As you recall, this is really related to the yard and an outgrowth of some of the success that we've had related to those types of activities. We did have a parking study group that met on this particular issue for a number of months. We won't go into everything on that, but I'll have Ms. Hoffman provide a quick little overview, and then we'll be open for any questions.
Thank you. So the Parking Standards Study Group, what they've achieved, some of the deliverables include the text amendment that Alan mentioned regarding having parking for the outdoor recreation area, having standard stipulation language to help direct the zoning adjustment hearing officers, a standardized valet parking policy, clarifying the use permit revocation process, and as we had said earlier, to withdraw the part where we were going to do a text amendment to allow right-of-way parking. So the text amendment now will only include the portion that has the definition for the outdoor recreation area and adding the provision to have 1 per 200 square foot area of that outdoor area being as part of the required parking. So what staff is asking for and recommending the approval of the parking text amendment per the memo dated February 28th, 2017 that requires 1 parking space per 200 square feet of outdoor recreation area associated with a bar or restaurant.
Yeah, we do. Thank you. We do have one card here marked in favor, Tony's decisions. Tony, do you wish to speak? Okay, great. Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure seeing you here. And Tony did mark in favor. Do I have any questions or comments from my colleagues in the Councilman Nowakowski?
No, I just really want to thank staff for all their hard work. And I mean, we're really pushing the adaptive reuse, especially in my district in the downtown area. You can see all these great restaurants and boutiques and businesses that are just popping up. And we have some of the great chefs and some of our resorts out there that are starting their own restaurants. And it's just incredible to see how these older buildings are being used for these funky different types of restaurants and reuse purposes. So I just really want to thank you all for thinking outside the box and working with the community, working with the neighborhoods, and working with the business owners. I think it's a great opportunity for everyone. It's a win-win. And I just really want to thank you, and I want to approve, make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to the information only item. Item 1 is for information only. Update on the sale of development of pre-owned property at 814 North 5th Avenue. It is for information only, but unless someone has any questions, we can just move forward.
Mr. Chair, this was heard at the Shen Subcommittee, but it is a downtown property, and that's why we want to always make sure this subcommittee is aware of things that are going on within the downtown.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 is a standing item. That's the FAA flight path update. We just had an update about a week ago. This has been a standing item for the last, well, more than a year now. And when all that was going on and continues to go on with the flight path and situation, the noise situation, we put this as a standing item so that people can get the latest as it evolves, and people always have an opportunity to come out and certainly tell us how they feel about it as well. So, Mr. Bennett, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. And as you referenced, really no updates since we last were in front of you on February the 22nd. Would just note that we continue to prepare for the oral arguments in the lawsuit of City of Phoenix and neighborhood associations versus the FAA, and those oral arguments are scheduled for March 17th. I would also, if it's okay with the chairman, I would also just like to acknowledge that, and many of you I think already know, that Mr. Chad Makovsky, who was Assistant Aviation Director at the Aviation Department and has been very helpful in this whole noise issue, will be leaving us. His last day, I think, is March the 17th, interestingly enough, the same day as the oral arguments. And he will be assuming a new role as the Executive Vice President in charge of operations at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. So we're very sorry to see him go. He has made a tremendous contribution to the City of Phoenix and Aviation Department in the past 15 years. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any question? And I don't see Chad here.
He was not able to join us.
He's out there working.
He's out there
Yeah.
working, exactly.
Mr. Chair, as you can imagine, Jim is dragging the very last out of Chad's marrow that he can while we have him for another couple weeks.
And we've been very, very fortunate to have Chad as part of our aviation team, as part of the City of Phoenix team that we have here. And, we'll all have a chance to continue to thank him for his service and just an incredible talent that he is and continues to become, because he's still growing, and it's pretty amazing. Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Mr.
for
Chad,
that update.
I have a comment on Chad.
Yep.
So Chad's not just a leader within the airport, but also within the community he lives in, especially in the Levine area. His wife and him are very active with the Levine barbecue and all kinds of activities, from sports to you name it. They're really a crucial part of the Levine area. So I know that the airport's going to be missing him, but we're also going to be missing him out there in the Levine community for everything he does out there. And for all those individuals that are listening regarding the FAA flight path update, if there's any updates that we need to have before that March 17th, call any of our offices, any council member that represents your area, and let them know what's going on. The more data that we have, the better off it is for us to, during those arguments, oral arguments on March 17th. So feel free to call us, write us a letter. All the data that we can gather would be great. If you hear planes flying flying over your neighborhoods and it's disturbing you, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I do have one card. Brent Kleinman. Good seeing you, Brent.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of this subcommittee. I believe my question is probably directed mostly to Mr. Bennett. We do have the hearing, the oral arguments coming up on the 17th. With the new cabinets and officers and everything going on with the new administration in D.C., can you provide an update as to what is going on our other fronts of attacking this flight change problems, as far as lobbying, any sort of legislative changes, any sort of work with new directors or same directors in the FAA? Is there a new policy or new people we may have a better chance at dealing with in DC than we did with the last administration? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman and to members of the subcommittee, there has been quite a bit of activity continuing. You may recall that Senators McCain and Flake successfully got a provision in the National Defense Authorization Act to require the FAA to come back into communities and assess the changes that they have made. We've been in communication with the Arizona congressional delegation, and it is my understanding that they are in the process of preparing a correspondence to the FAA to outline their expectations as to what the legislative intent of that provision was. In addition, Congressman Gallego is part of the Noise Caucus, or the Quiet Skies Caucus within Congress. They've introduced a piece of legislation that would also require some additional studies by FAA on the impact of noise in the communities. There have not been any major changes in the leadership at the Federal Aviation Administration at the national headquarters level. We do, however, have a new regional administrator for the Federal Aviation Administration that is in our district. And the former administrator, Mr. Glenn Martin, is no longer the regional administrator, so we are in the process of establishing communications with the new regional administrator to share some of our concerns in the Phoenix area.
And if I could ask one real quick follow-up with that, I know Councilman Nowakowski spoke about us contacting them as in regards to noise or so forth over the next 2.5 weeks, but who should residents now be reaching out to in regards to this bill that was signed into law and our new FAA regional director? Where do we send our issues to so they're still continually heard in the legislative matter, as well as to the FAA directly, to make sure they understand the intent of those words were to readdress what's happened in Phoenix, not just, ooh, that looks nice on a piece of paper?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Kleiman, I don't think anything has materially changed for how it is how you've been communicating, using, if you wish to use the elected officials, they immediately contact us. If you contact staff directly at the airport, they also are picking this up and are working real hard with the new regional administrator to build relationships, rebuild relationships there to see if we can't make some progress at the regional level. As Jim said, what's going on nationally, whether within the agency or in Congress, again, as yet has not materially changed. So all the avenues that you have had experience in working are those mostly that we should continue to work.
Experience in not working. And lastly, is the regional director, new regional director, open up any chances to negotiation or mediation being put back on the table in the legal aspects of resolving this solution?
Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Chairman, to members of the subcommittee, we've not had those conversations with the new regional director at this point. Like I said, we're just trying to establish new communications with him. He's very new to the position.
Thank you for the information, Mr. Bennett. And Mr. Kleiman, thank you for speaking up. We're fortunate to have you here. Okay, so any other questions or comments on this item? This is just for information. It's a standing item. And again, thank you for the update. We'll move now to item 3, Aviation Department 5-year Capital Improvement Program. Mr. Bennett?
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, this is the annual presentation that we do before the subcommittee just to outline our 5-year capital improvement program and to answer any questions that members of the subcommittee may have regarding the program. This year, the program that we have in front of and in the budget process consists of 41 projects, and as seen here on this slide, 28 of those projects are at Sky Harbor, 7 projects at Phoenix Deer Valley, and 6 projects at Phoenix Goodyear Airport. And as in past years, the program is comprised of some major ongoing projects that have been underway for a few years. One of the major projects is the Terminal 4 North Apron reconstruction. The council may remember that we are rebuilding the old original pavements around the gates of the north concourses at Terminal 4, and that project will continue. It's about 1/3 complete, and it continues and is phased so as to minimize the impact on the airline community. The other project that I'm sure you're familiar with is our Terminal 3 modernization program. That project continues in the capital improvement program and is slated for completion within the next 3 or 4 years. Depends on how effective we are at our construction. Anytime you remodel, it is a little more challenging than building new. We also have a utility vault upgrade program. That is to bring some of our utility vaults and infills into compliance with the changing FAA standards. And we have some fairly tight tolerances on our airfield, and that project continues. And then our Terminal 4 Terrazzo project. If you've had the opportunity to go through Terminal 4 recently, you'll notice that we are changing out some of the carpets in the piers and replacing it with terrazzo in the high traffic areas. We estimate that when that project is complete, it'll save us over $600,000 a year in carpet replacements. Some of the new projects that are being proposed for the program include the Phoenix SkyTrain Stage 2 and, of course, Terminal 4 South Concourse, S1. The subcommittee, I'm sure, is familiar with those, and the City Council back in October confirmed the subcommittee's recommendation to proceed with those two projects. We also have a couple of new projects. One is the T2 South Concourse demolition. That project involves the removal of the old Terminal 2 concourse and the apron pavement around there. Once the Terminal 3 project is complete, we need to demolish the Terminal 2 to make way for the operations out of the new South Concourse. And then the Terminal 3, what we call the inner PCC ramp, that's basically a nice way of saying the pavements around the North Concourse at Terminal 3 need to be reconstructed. They're some of the original pavements from when that building was constructed back in the late 70s. At our two reliever airports, we have a couple of new projects. One is the addition of major projects, the construction of a new taxiway D, which is parallel to the runway at Deer Valley. That is required to help us meet some of the FAA airport design standards that have changed. And then at Phoenix Goodyear Airport, we are in the process of putting together a program to do several apron replacements at the airport. This is just a view of the adopted budget history for the capital program at the airport. And you can see that there are peaks and valleys in the program. And this is, for instance, in fiscal year 2010, this represents when the commitment was made to start SkyTrain. And so you see a peak when you have a major commitment or a major budgetary commitment, and then you see a reduction in the amounts throughout the other years. So in 2017 or 2018, you'll see another peak coming up as we move ahead with SkyTrain Phase 2 and other projects. Our proposed funding sources for the program is represented here. Aviation Department has sufficient financial resources available to fund the program. The larger share of this proposal, the $715 million in bonds, those will be used primarily to fund Stage 2 of the Phoenix SkyTrain as well as Terminal 4 Concourse S1 of the modernization program. And then lastly, just the next largest piece of this airport improvement fund, that is pay-as-you-go funding for some of these efforts. The sources of those revenues are from our agreements with the airlines as well as our other commercial activities that we engage in, such as the parking business, the terminal concessions, as well as rental car revenues. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes a brief presentation of the proposed program. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. We do have a question, Councilwoman Williams.
Airport is always an exciting place. It is always changing, growing, and being successful. But when it comes to Terminal 2, there's been so many conversations over the years on whether that comes down or not. And if so, what happens to that mural? So what's the big decision and what's going to happen? I'm going to put you right on the spot.
Mr. Chairman, to Councilwoman Williams, thank you for that question. The plan for Terminal 2 is to demolish the facility. We need to make that a space available for the future, and it will be demolished, and one of the programs is, in the capital program, is to start that demolition. We have been assessing the mural that is in the building. We've made the determination that the mural can be preserved and relocated. And so we are currently studying relocation options, and then once we find the most logical relocation option, we will return with a discussion with the subcommittee on our recommendation for relocating the mural. But we're trying to find a place to relocate it.
Make many, many people happy. Thank you.
Councilman Noakowski?
We talked about the Phoenix SkyTrain, that's stage 2. I know one of the things I was mentioning is building a hotel right there on that 24th Street stop that we're having for our employees. Have we looked into that? Have we examined that at all? And is there a way that you can bring a report to us later on in the future? Also, the impact that it will have for the Sacred Heart community. We have a church that has been there for the last 30 years. The community has been wanting to use that church for some type of a cultural center or so. Is there conversations with the community about the usage of that church and that surrounding property, seeing that the SkyTrain will have an impact in that area?
Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Noakowski, let me firstly address, it's really kind of two completely separate issues there. So let me firstly address the 24th Street SkyTrain station. The SkyTrain Stage 2 proposal for that is what we refer to as a Western Ground Transportation Center, that we envision that will have parking, economy-type parking similar to the East Economy parking, as well as we think there's a potential there for a hotel and/or commercial development associated with that. In respect to that commercial development parking and/or hotel development there, we are working with our financial advisors and teams, and in the process of trying to construct a RFI that we would send out to the private sector to see if there was a potential public-private partnership interest by the private sector in developing that Western Ground Transportation Center for us.
And then, Mr. Chair, Councilman Noakowski, as to the property, plus or minus 25, 30 acres, where the former church building sits at 16th Street on Buckeye, there is, as has been for some time, ongoing dialogue with a variety of interested stakeholders, including specific community members, and I don't think there are any final conclusions as to the disposition of that land. It seems that continued dialogue is appropriate and necessary. We've been going through land reuse in the broader area, and when we think there are some options that are ripe to come share with you, we'll be back to this subcommittee to share what those ideas might be and get your feedback and advice before we advance any further.
Perfect. And then a follow-up question would be talking about the Phoenix Deer Valley Airport. We have 7 projects up there. Is any of those projects including hangars? Because I know that one of the things that we're looking at is the lack of hangars at Sky Harbor, and also how do we actually compete against Scottsdale Airport and other airports when it comes to big events? So do we have any plans for hangars at Sky Harbor or even at the Deer Valley Airport?
Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Nowakowski, within our capital program, we do not propose to use any of our aviation resources to build any additional hangars at Sky Harbor and/or Deer Valley and/or Goodyear. However, at Deer Valley specifically, we've been in conversations with two different parties concerning their desire to develop some hangar space at Deer Valley. And we've also been in discussion with two private parties at Sky Harbor about potential development of additional hangar capacity at Sky Harbor. But we don't propose, once again, to use any aviation funds for those developments.
Okay, any other questions or thoughts? Jim, Mr. Bennett, thank you so much for your time yesterday and for the effort of all of the aviation staff. Yesterday, we had a great event. It was the first doing business with Sky Harbor event, the first of many. It's a conversation that we had in my office when we started talking about things like this CIP budget and all of the activity moving forward. And we wanted to be sure that, you know, we would offer as much information as possible to anyone who wants to do business at Sky Harbor. So we had a really great crowd. Mr. Booth, thank you for supporting it. It was great to have you out as well. I'm looking around and I see a lot of the same faces that were there for that event, and I think it went over very well. So that was not to take the place of any outreach meetings that we already have planned. That was in addition to, and I believe that is something that we're going to continue to do here for, bless you, for Sky Harbor. So thank you for your effort on that. Okay, so the next item, I believe the final item, we've already tackled item 5. We're now to item 4, Terminal 3 Concession Program Strategy and Request to Issue Revenue Contract Solicitation.
Councilman Valenzuela, I would ask for this item to be continued. There are certain things that I need to look at. And so I didn't have the opportunity, it's on me, the last 2 weeks to be able to look at it, since I was managing other pieces. So.
Okay, so this was going to be on the subcommittee last month. The entire subcommittee was, we moved the entire subcommittee, and so we're now hearing it now. We do have I think we would need a motion for that. So the motion would be for continuance?
Yes.
We have a second. Any discussion? I do have a card.
My discussion is I'd like to maybe hear the individuals that have come
Yeah.
with some of their concerns, and then
We
maybe
do have
after,
one card.
maybe after that we can actually continue it.
Well, we have a motion and a second, so we'll keep that for future. So that's on the table. We do have a card. Our good friend, Councilman Michael Johnson, is here to speak. I believe he was on this item, right, Mike? Yeah. Councilman, please join us.
You know, first of all, let me, the chair and the aviation, because I think not only do we still have the world's most friendliest airport, but we have one of the best looking airports in the country now. I think, you know, as I have the opportunity to go through there and see all the improvements from the SkyTrain and look at what we're doing now, that the airport is continuing to grow. My one concern is to try to make sure that our airport has always been one who has set a standard for making sure that we have diversity, that we are inclusive of small business, local business, and minority businesses, that as part of the contracts going out, that when the concessionaires are going out, that they're actually in the community recruiting small businesses to actually participate and be a part of it. Because as we know, the airport is part of our economy, and that economy, by us going out and bringing in small business, local business, and minority businesses, help us do that. And I would just wanted to come and just make sure that we're still pushing that direction to make sure that we continue to do that, because we have seen a lot of local businesses at the airport. Also, Mr. Blue, I also wanted to comment because there's a big concern, especially in the African American community, that there's been some employees within EOD or working within there that have been either getting ready to be transferred or getting ready to be disciplined, and they feel like there's some retaliation that's going on. So I'd like to get an opportunity to talk to you about some of that to make sure that that's not happening, or it could be a perception that could be going on. But that communication is extremely important. But again, I still think we have the greatest airport, we still have the greatest city, and all those things that are going on, that we continue to participate, continue to make those things happen. So, Mr. Chair, council people, thank you for giving me that opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councilman. We'll get you some, I guess, Mr. Blue, you've known Michael longer than I have. Councilman Johnson was the chair of this particular subcommittee for, I believe, all 12 years that you were on the council. So big shoes to fill here, and so we'll be sure to
Yes, sir.
get you the information, and thank you for everything. Okay, so we do have that's the only card we have. Anyone else here who hasn't spoken, wish to speak on this item? Okay, the motion is for continuance. We have a second. The motion is for continuance. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. This item will be continued to the next next subcommittee meeting. And thank you, Mr. Bennett. Okay, this is our final call to the public. We have no cards for the final call to the public. We're now into the future agenda items.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, we stand ready to take any requests you might have.
Okay,
I have a request.
Councilman
This is
Nowakowski.
actually like my third request regarding the old contract with SSP and basically where they stand with the small businesses, minority businesses, agreement that they had with us. I already got the information about the MAG aspect of it, but I still don't have all those different partnerships that are involved with that. Who are the owners, who have interest in any of the business, and just those details.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, based on your specific request in that regard, at the last meeting, aviation staff is specifically working their way through it. As you can imagine, there are a lot of concession contracts and they're rather complicated, and so it's taking some time to assemble the list of names you requested, but we are working on it.
All right, thank you.
And
Mr. Chair?
Councilwoman Williams?
I would like to have a copy of that report, and also would you add in post
I'm
all
sorry?
the information on the second major vendor out there? I would like the same information so we can look at both.
Well, we will do so.
And if you, obviously,
We would, our goal would be to share with the entire subcommittee.
Right.
thank you for that. And I agree, it should be, obviously, we don't want to single anyone out. That's not how we do business. At the city, we want to be sure that, for the sake of transparency and consistency, that we take a look at that.
Okay.
Are there any other requests from my colleagues for future agenda items?
Can we look at the whole Sacred Heart properties? And what are the future plans, and if we can reach out to the community and start that conversation? Or have a timeline on that?
We'd be pleased to share what we know with the subcommittee on a future agenda.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.